Okay, and we're live. Jonathan, welcome to another episode of Rybarian Radio. Let's jump right into it. Why don't we start off with an introduction? Tell the audience who you are and what you do.
Cool. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited. So, a little bit about me. I am a father of five. I have an amazing wife who keeps us all moving along. I work in IT for about 11, 12 years now. And I'm out there as the evolved dad, showing dads how the right way it is to become to be a father, simply because I wasn't. And I know what it's like to not be a good father, and I know how important it is to be a good father. And I want other fathers to see that. I don't want them to continue going down that road. There's no reason that their families should be suffering. So, here to help, here to share. That's the short of my story.
That's awesome. So, was there a specific catalyst where you kind of thought to yourself, I want to start building a community around this. This is something I want to start sharing. Was there anything specific that happened, or was it just kind of like a slow progression?
So, it's actually interesting. I never really thought that I had much to share, to be honest. And I had initially started out on crypto Twitter. They're primarily for the tech, being in IT. And there was some stuff that ended up happening on there that I tried to bring out more happiness and joy, give people like a little bit more direction in life, realize that there's more to life than just money. And I met up with some creators who are now much larger creators, chatting with them. They brought me down the path of a new way of creating, to be able to build an audience, but to build an audience in order to help others. The louder your voice is, the more people you can help out. So I started chatting with those people and getting on calls. And basically, they told me, like, you have to choose a path. If you really want to make an impact, you have to choose a path. And they said, think of what you are good at. And honestly, fatherhood wasn't the top thing. But once it came up in the list of things, it just sort of clicked. I
Hmm.
was like, I'm a father of five. People ask pretty often, like, what do you do about this? What do you do about that?
Yeah, it's not as common these days, right? Having five kids.
Yeah. So I started talking about it. I said, I'll give it a shot. And things just went crazy from there. There's definitely a tremendous need for it. And I know that I have what to share with people. So I'm there. I want to help as many people as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I feel like, collectively sort of the newer generations of dads are kind of evolving, maybe, I don't know, by default, it seems, or maybe just like and I'm throwing myself in this category, are just more sort of open to the idea of improving. Do you feel like that's kind of the sentiment? Do you agree with that? And if so, why do you think that is?
So I definitely see, it seems to me that there's a lot more people that are not only going down that path, but are open to the idea and even searching out. You may even have a lot of men that are not yet fathers that are actively seeking out what does it take to become a good father. And I think that a lot of that stems from how people grew up. They didn't necessarily have a father around, and just due to the nature of how we live now and how technology works, it affords fathers the ability to be around a lot more. And some guys had great relationships with their fathers, but it was very, very minimal amount of time. Others did not have great relationships with their fathers, and they want to change that. And because of social media, there's just so much more interconnectivity that people all over can see what it's like to really be a good father, how much of a difference you can make in your child's life, how much stronger of a relationship you could have with your wife, and how much that affects your kids. So simply just being able to see so much more constantly, we're always on our phones or we're on our computers. There's some sort of form of a screen that's in our faces for a lot of the day. So it's just there. And not only is it for the fathers that, or the soon to be fathers that want to make that change, but even the fathers and the soon to be fathers that may not be aware of it, it's something that's now begging the question, who are you going to be as a father?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the social media thing is a big part of it, and just sort of like the availability of all that information, right? Like I think we can attribute a lot of things, outside of, fatherhood or whatever, to the past generations of, simply just like they didn't know better, right? Just because they didn't have access to that information, right? Like sort of, our dads growing up, it's like the only thing that they had to go off was like whatever the other dads at the barbecue were talking about, what they were doing, sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It was, so unless you just happened to and they were just going off what they learned from their dads, right?
right.
um they didn't have, unless they had access to someone who was maybe a mentor in their life just by chance, right? Like they didn't really have anything to go off, so they didn't know any better, right? Just in general, like with parenting, with, everything across the board, I think that's the case. So now that you can actually see, and maybe like it has something to do with like somewhat of a, like an intrinsic sense of competition with men too. Like maybe we see the other dads doing some cool stuff with their kids, like, I can do that too, or I can be better too, right? um, and I think that's always been kind of maybe applied to other areas, whether it's like, our recreational activities or our careers, right? There's that sense of kind of competition and wanting to do better, and now we're just applying it to the area of fatherhood as well. Maybe that's something to do with it too, right?
Definitely could be. I'll
Yeah.
have to poll it one day.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see sort of, how this happens, because we're kind of the first generation to now have access to the internet and have access to this crazy amount of information, right? So how does that, evolve for the, even for the next generation? It'll be interesting to see that path.
Yeah, and especially now with the creator economy, it's really it's taken a life form of its own. I mean, the amount of fathers that I've seen that are active on Twitter or X itself, forgetting about all the other platforms, there's so much good going on. And we recently started a Spaces for dads on X, and it went for like 2.5 hours. There's a lot of emotion out there. There's a lot of people that want to change, and there's a lot of people just seeing what's going on. They weren't aware. I mean, really, to me, initially being a dad was taking care of your family financially.
Hmm.
But now fathers are available for so much more. It's not like we have to be out of the house for all those hours and we're not seeing our family or going away for weeks at a time for the most part. So we have that connection and we have that ability even to make phone calls, to make video calls. It's a
Hmm.
new world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's changing so quickly. We're just trying to keep up, right? Um,
That's for sure.
yeah. So I wanted to ask, sort of, what do you think are some of the areas that, you think are the biggest, where dads can make, some big improvements, right? Like what are a few of those areas that are sort of the most, you know, bang for your buck, so to speak, 80/20 rule sort of thing, that can make a biggest impact if they just put a little bit more effort into.
I would say the main place is presence. Just having presence. When you're with your child, when you're with your wife, focus on them. Take your phone, whatever you have, move it to another room, and just focus on them. When you're talking to them, talk with them, not to them. Have a conversation with them. It may sound only like words, but there's a very big difference. And listen to them just to hear what they have to say. Don't start formulating an answer. They just want to be heard. You just want to build that connection. And with having that presence, that's what it's all about. They just want to have that connection with you. Both your wife, kids, that's all they're looking for. So putting away your phone, it's got to be one of the hardest things.
Absolutely.
Not that you can't just go for that one DM, that one message, that one voice note. No. When you have that time, especially nowadays when we're so busy with so many things going on, even though we're around our families, we're not necessarily giving them that presence that they deserve, that they need. So it's so important to figure out ways to keep that to the side. Make sure that the priority is your family and make sure to be present.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. That's one I struggle with for sure too. I think pretty much anyone with a smartphone these days can struggle with. It's so easy to just, have this little dopamine factory in your pocket and just constantly be checking it, right? That's one thing for me
For
too that I'm trying
sure.
to work on. Yeah, especially with all the social channels and everything. It's so easy to just constantly be checking it. But I'm trying in my life to try and compartmentalize a little bit more, right? And sort of like create time blocks, just like how we would for work and for productivity, right? Sort of apply that to our personal lives as well, and say, okay, no, this is family time. Okay, this is time where I'm going to dedicate. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to scroll maybe for 15 minutes, and then I'm done, and I'm on to the next thing, right? Versus having this urge to scroll just constantly pulling you away from whatever else you're doing, right?
100%. So I actually am a huge advocate of app timers. I have them on my phone because when it comes down to it, I enjoy YouTube Shorts. I enjoy it. And there's no reason that you should be pulling away yourself from things that you enjoy unless it's destructive. And, you know, the Twitter app, X app, YouTube, any other apps that you find yourself on. And you can look in your phone. Nowadays, it's all on your phone. You can literally just go into your phone and see how long you're on those apps for. If you're on those apps for 2 hours a day, start a timer and drop it down to, let's say, an hour and a half. Don't go all the way down because that's just, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Take it slow,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but make a change. Just make that little change. And if you can't do it for, for an hour and a half, do an hour 45, whatever you can do, but start slowly cutting down on it by using something that's stopping it for you. Because so often we can get caught up using the apps, not even realizing time is flying by.
Mm-hmm.
And we end up looking back, we're like, what did I do? But we'll
Yeah.
do it again the same thing the next day.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's a different type of consumption versus the former way of consuming media where you sit down and watch TV for hours, right? So, I'm thinking to myself like, oh, I hardly watch TV anymore. I never sit down and watch, 2 or 3 hours of TV in the evening. Like I'm doing great. And then you look at your phone, it's like, shit, I've been on Instagram for like 2 hours today. It's exactly the same thing. It's not any better. In fact,
Right.
it's probably worse because
Yeah.
it's hurting my attention span. Instead of just like sitting down and watching one thing for an hour, I'm just constantly checking in and flipping between different apps, right? It's actually probably worse than just actually sitting down and having dedicated TV time. So I realize I'm kind of fooling myself, thinking I'm so great because I've cut down on my content consumption, but really I just spread it out into little tiny pieces throughout the day instead, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, setting the timers on that stuff is super important. That's actually something I've implemented recently just to kind of get a handle on it, right? And as you said, first off, it's just a good idea to get a sense of it, right? You don't have to go cold turkey and cut everything down, but just get an idea of what that consumption looks like and how can you start to kind of trim that down a little bit. That's good. I'm definitely working on that one.
Yeah, the cold turkey aspect is something I would definitely recommend against. And unless it's something that's destructive. Like if
Hmm.
there's any sort of addictive habits or whatever it is that like you're like, okay, I just got to totally drop it and move on. That's one thing. But in general, the sustainable way is to really do it slowly. Unless you're planning on totally cutting away from it. Because if
Yeah.
you're going to be using it and think about it, be realistic with yourself. You can't lie to yourself. Like
Hmm.
you got to take
Have
it
the
slow.
self-awareness, right?
Exactly. Take it little by little, even when you're building up something. Like when I started being more mindful and more present with my wife, making sure that we had time with each other every single day. Because it came to a point where it felt like we were just living life together, but like sort of like side by side. Like we didn't have that connection.
Hmm.
And I started with just 5 minutes a day. And as corny as it sounds, I put on a timer because initially I was like, I want to make sure that I'm getting those 5 minutes. And with
Okay,
everything being,
but did you tell her that you put a timer on?
I don't remember.
Because I could just picture my wife being like, "I'm be like, all right, we got 5 minutes.
No, no, no,
Let's
no,
have a
not like that.
conversation." Yeah, I know. That's just how I thought of it. Obviously, that's not
Yeah,
that's not the right way to go about it. But that's kind of
no,
like
no,
how
no.
I thought. Because I've done it
Yes.
before. Like I actually have done that. I think before, where she's like, I don't know if she wanted something like maybe she's like, "Oh, can you just can you just press my shoulders for like a minute or whatever?" And I just like set
Put
a
on a
minute
timer.
on my phone, and she's like, "You actually set a timer?" you know. So yeah, don't do
Oh
that. Would
man.
not recommend.
No, not cool. Yeah, so it's more of just for me it was making sure that I was getting those 5 minutes in because sometimes we get caught up in the moment and it could be half an hour and sometimes we feel like it's an hour and it's really only been 30 seconds. So just to make sure that you're getting that time in because you want the consistency of it. So every day to make sure that you're getting that time. Now, for the past I don't even know how long it is anymore. My wife and I go for a walk every night. And usually it's about a 15-20 minute walk. Sometimes it's a little bit less, depending on what's going on. And sometimes here and there we miss just
Hmm.
because life happens. But it's so important to start small and to build slowly on those habits, whether that's with a relationship with your wife, whether that's the relationship with your kids, that's the presence, that's putting away your phone. Just start small. Because when you start small, it's a lot easier to achieve and then you'll be able to build on that. But if you run in trying to do these massive amounts of time, you're going to fall flat on your face because it's going to come to a point where you just can't do that anymore. You haven't trained yourself enough to be at that point. So just go into it smoothly as opposed to like, oh, I could do this. I got it. I can do it an hour a day. Don't do that. It's not worth it.
No, for sure. It has to be something that you actually, and that goes with anything, right? It's something that you have to, that you can actually, that can be sustainable in your life and that you actually enjoy doing, right?
100%.
Because willpower doesn't last forever, right? You have to have a certain level of discipline to stick to something, and if you don't have that level of discipline, you're not going to stick to something that's really hard and challenging for you. It's just, and I look at that especially with health and fitness. That's kind of a big one I see with a lot of people. They just try and, oh, you know what, it's January 1st. I'm signing up for that gym membership. I'm going to go to the gym, 4 times a week and just absolutely kill myself and just be super sore. And guess what? By March, the gym is back to being half empty, right?
If
Um,
March,
yeah,
if it gets done.
if even that, right? That's how it is. So, um, that's kind of a good segue. I wanted to talk a little bit about your health journey. I was scrolling, doom scrolling the other day, and I came across some doctor, and he was talking about how you hear some people talking about what the biggest regrets are at the end of life, right? People talk about it's never, oh, I wish I worked more. It's always, I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I did something that made me happy, that sort of thing, right? But as a doctor, when he sees it coming from a place of where people are really struggling with their health later on in life, he said that it's not any of those things. It's not, I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I did this. I wish I did that. It's actually, I wish I took better care of myself. And I wish I had started earlier taking better care of myself so I didn't end up like this. Right. There's also the saying that I'm not sure what it's attributed to, but sort of the average person can have 1,000 wishes, but the sick person only has one, right? It's just to
Right.
be healthy, right? So when you lose your health, it puts everything into perspective. It's like, because if you don't have that, you don't have anything, right? So I think that's a big thing for me, and kind of what I'm doing is trying to inspire other dads, younger dads, to start now, right? That's a big thing for me because it's so much harder to get it back and try to fight for it. And it might be too late by the time you think you're going to actually have time when your kids are older. The time is now. Now is when you can actually take your health. And even if you can make small steps, right? Those add up, sort of just like your savings account, right? Just your long-term savings for retirement. It's compounding interest. It's the same with your health. If you can start in your 30s, you're going to see the benefits in your 60s and 70s, right? So just kind of curious about your journey through that. Was there any kind of realization that you had that you need to focus on that a little bit more? Would just love to hear about your journey there.
So it started, I don't know if there's anything specific. I think it was more of a collective realization that I have to show up better for my kids. And part of that is being healthy. I was actually talking on the spaces recently. We were talking about what would I tell a new father or a soon to be father? And the main concept that I would tell them, or that I do tell them, establish a routine beforehand. Because like you're saying, once kids come around, it's not easier to change. And it's going to take time to get into that routine. So the
Mhm.
more you establish up front, the better off you're going to be. But realize that whatever you do and however you show up, that's what your kids are going to follow. And not only is that going to affect your kids, but if you set up your kids properly and you're helping them succeed in life, that's going to get passed down to their kids. So it can really go both ways. If you're showing up unhealthy and they pick that up, there's that chance that that's going to get passed down. So I couldn't necessarily run around with my kids. And even when I did, I would get so run down, I would be done with for like the remainder of the day. It was really bad. My wife and I were just discussing this a few weeks ago because we were doing some yard work and I was working hard the entire day. And my wife mentioned, she's like, I don't know if you realize, but like 2 years ago, you'd be on the couch now and you'd be sick for a week. And it's true. That's what it used to be. So I started losing weight and I started doing a workout routine, which for probably, I would say about too long. I'm not even sure how long. I wasn't consistent about it. I actually have back over there on the wall, I have a chart, a weekly chart for all the exercises that I do. And it's collective of stuff that I enjoy. So it's partially research to get an understanding of which parts of my body I should be working out. And then picking exercises that I like, that I enjoy. Because if you're not going to enjoy it, it's just going to be that much harder to do every day. And
Mhm.
they're mostly all body weight exercises. So I can do them anywhere. So if we're traveling, or on vacation, wherever I am, I could do my exercises for the most part. So that's really what it's all about. It's fitting it into your schedule, making it something that you enjoy, making it something that's easily accessible. And I'm not saying not to go to the gym. For people that, I've seen people that are on vacation that are still going to use the hotel gym. Or maybe when you're on vacation, you're going to do those body weight exercises. But make sure that it's something that you enjoy. If you're hitting this Stairmaster or whatever they call it these days, and you don't like that, there's more of a chance that you're not going to end up continuing to do it. And it's only at a detriment to yourself and to your wife and to your kids. Because if you're not healthy, it's just going to end up harming everybody. You're at a higher risk of diseases, and you just can't enjoy things as much as you would be able to if you were more fit.
Oh, for sure. That's a big one too. What you touched on there, sort of the exercise selection and doing something that you actually enjoy doing. That's really important, because I think a lot of people, maybe they just start training, they get signed up with a personal trainer or whatever, and they start doing a routine, trying to put them in a very specific mold of like the type of exercises they should do and whatnot, and they don't enjoy it. They don't like it. Like, some people just don't like going to the gym. Some people don't like lifting weights, right? And it's like, and then they just think like, oh, well, that's what fitness is, because in their head, like, that's what they attribute to fitness, right?
Right.
But it's like, no, it's like, did you try kettlebells? Did you try body weight training? Did you try, playing a sport just like multiple times per week? Just whatever. It has to be something that you enjoy. And some of those things you can learn to enjoy over time as you get a little bit better at them. Because like when you start anything, anything you start is going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. It's going to feel awkward. You're going to feel stupid, right? Like that's how it is with anything, right? Um, so you can learn to like stuff, but it's also, don't be afraid to explore and do things that actually fit your lifestyle, right? So
Yes.
I've been a big proponent of sort of body weight exercises and calisthenics and those kind of exercises too, for a lot of reasons. But for one of those reasons too is you can do them anywhere. You could take them wherever you go. It's so
Exactly.
applicable, right? Um, and also just being able to work out at home, I think, is a big one, especially for dads. Because that's one of the things I know that's kept me consistent over the years, is always having sort of a dedicated fitness area in my house, right, where I can do workouts at home. So it's like on days where it's like, well, I only have an hour, um, so I can get in an hour workout because I'm at home and I don't have to go anywhere, right? Versus when it's minus 30 outside and it's snow and I have to go out and clean the car and drive to the gym and whatever. You just burned like 75% of your workout, right?
Right.
You just lost that opportunity. And people think it's like, oh, I don't have the space for, have a home gym or whatever. I don't have that big of a house. Like, it doesn't have to be. It literally just has to be like some room on the floor where you can do push-ups and different kinds of body weight exercises. Maybe you have a dumbbell or a kettlebell where you can do something. Something is always better than nothing, right?
Oh,
And
100%.
I think that's so important. So do you work out mostly at home then? You don't go to a gym?
I don't go to a gym. But 2 points I want to bring up to what you were talking about. One thing, people have to stop looking at social media to see what the latest trend is for working out. Shiny object syndrome to the nth degree. Today they're
Mm-hmm.
doing one exercise, tomorrow they're doing the other. Stick with what you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Forget about everything else. And then, as far as the home workouts, one of the greatest benefits that I've found is your kids want to join in. From my 4-year-old to my almost 13-year-old, they want to do push-ups, they want to do sit-ups, they want to do squats, lunges, they want to do pull-ups, they want all these things. They're excited for it and they start doing that. And that's really something that we want to teach our children, because if they start learning this when they're younger and they start doing these exercises to whatever extent, we're not talking about anything extreme. We're not talking about, you know, pushing them to do ridiculous amounts of exercise. They enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
We're made to move around. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
this is like an alien thing. We're made to move
Yeah.
around. So giving your kids that ability to see you working out and to be able to join in with you, it's a big deal. I mean, like, even like getting like a jump rope, it's a tremendous exercise and your kids may really enjoy it. Get them active. Kids don't necessarily get to be as active as they should be.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they are, it's great training for them to see that their father or even their mother, who has a busy lifestyle, is making time to take care of themselves. making sure that they're healthy, that they're around for them, and that it can be done. And like you're saying, you don't need a whole gym at home. You really don't. You need some floor space. Maybe like you can get a pull-up bar that you can put on a doorway. That's
Yeah.
literally what we have
A,
downstairs.
a pull-up bar unlocks so many things, right? Just like the
For
cheapest,
sure.
simplest equipment, it just unlocks so many things.
Yeah. And there's so many that you could not only use on the top of the doorway, but you can move to the lower part of the doorway for sit-ups. I mean, there's endless amounts of things that you can do at home. And I think that that was one of the things that the pandemic actually showed is that
Mhm.
you can still be very fit at home. And a lot of people are huge proponents now of working out at home. It's something that I've been doing for years just simply because, like you're saying, by the time you get to the car and then get to the gym, you burn most of your time. And if health is so important for you and you don't have the time, then you're going to find a place to make that time. And usually that place is going to be at home.
Yep, absolutely. I think a lot of parents fall into that sort of that trap of saying sort of like do as I say, not as I do, right? You could just picture sort of the kind of the dad who's seeing that their kid is playing too much video games and he's like, go outside and play, right? While he sits on the couch and like watches sports. It's like, bro, why don't you go outside and play? Like you go outside and do some push-ups, be
Yeah,
active, run around with your kids, like set the example. Like when kids see you doing that, they're just going to want to do what you do, right? So why not set that example? It's pretty simple. You don't have to yell at your kids and tell them this and tell them, just show them. They're going to want to copy you and do what you're doing, right?
that's such a great point because one of the mistakes that I used to make, I know myself, and I know that there's a lot of other fathers that I've spoken with that also have made the same mistake, is that when you do things with your child, they're willing to do it. But if you're telling them to go clean up their room or to go clean up a mess or whatever it is, it becomes a little bit, it's not so exciting. There's more of a friction there. But if you say,
Mm-hmm.
can you help me clean this up? Now, obviously, there's going to be points where it's like, you got to clean up your room, make your bed, whatever else there is that's standardizing your home. Again, it
Mm-hmm.
has to be in your home. Doesn't have to be what the next person's doing. The same thing with going outside. Hey, you want to go outside and have a catch? Not like get off your video games. Let's go have a catch. Or I have
Mm-hmm.
some time now. Let's go play ball. Let's go run around. So every child's going to have their thing, but they want you as a father to be there with them. That's what makes it exciting. It's like even playing video games. There's nothing wrong with sitting down and playing video games with your kid, but make sure that everything is within reason. The same way
Mm-hmm.
that we don't want to be using social media too much, we have to train our kids to be able to balance whatever the dopamine or whatever they're getting to their head.
Mm-hmm.
Train them to focus on what's really important. And yes, it's okay to enjoy yourself. It's important to enjoy yourself. But don't get lost in those things because they're made to pull you in.
Yeah, they're designed for that exact reason, is to make you want to play more, right?
Yes.
Um, and that's the same. It goes the same with foods. Foods are like that too, right? Highly processed foods. They're literally designed in a laboratory to get you to buy as much of them and and consume as much of them as possible, right? And then people wonder, like,
100%.
why am I struggling? Why can't I stop? Why can't I just have one Oreo? Why do I have to eat the whole sleeve? It's like, well, it's not really your fault because they've designed it that way, but it is your responsibility to make some changes and to deal with that, right? So I want to ask about your diet too. Like you said, you lost quite a bit of weight. So how did you sort of implement some changes there? What are some things that you did that you saw a big difference?
So the weight loss wasn't the healthiest. It was more of like almost like a starvation diet in a way. Um, Now what I actually do intermittent fasting,
Mm,
16/8. So fasting for 16 hours and eating for 8. The main reason for me doing that is to stop snacking, to be honest.
mm,
That was like the biggest thing for me. And initially from just doing that, I lost a handful of pounds off the bat. But that wasn't really the point. The point is just really to be more conscious of the fact of that when I'm eating, choose healthier foods. And I don't really need to eat as much. I don't need it. It's not something that's necessary. There have been days here and there, like if I'm really not feeling well, where I haven't done the fasting, and that's okay. Because the point is not like I have to do that. But as of now, I've been doing this for about a little bit over 6 months, and I think ended up missing like one day or maybe 2 days. So that to me has been, it's like the phone app timer. It's like, okay, you're not eating now. Like when I used to be standing by my desk, I would just eat for no reason because I was bored. I could,
Hmm.
just bring some snacks to my desk and just munch on stuff. And it's horrible. It's horrible. There's absolutely no reason for it. And once I became more health conscious for that, my meals became more focused on health and nutrition. What am I eating? What am I putting into my body? And from there, it just sort of, it keeps changing and keeps improving just based on a more cognizant of what I'm putting into my body, and I'm getting more information on what's important and what I shouldn't be putting in my body, and it just sort of goes from there. So it's just like it was that initial focus of changing over from eating for no reason, being an American, I guess, and being conscious about it, realizing that there is absolutely no reason. Focus more on the meals, less on the snacks. I'm not getting into the science of it because I know there's people that say have 5 meals a day or 6 meals, whatever it is. Do your thing. But to me, that has been the biggest change because now when I do have that time to eat, it's going to be healthier options.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure. Snacking, um, for a lot of people, right? We live in this amazing time of crazy surplus when it comes to food, and there's just endless options of things to try and to have, right? Um, so that's a good one. Just and like you said, back to the timer, right? It's like now's the time to eat. Now's the time we're not going to eat, right? Just kind of like setting those boundaries for yourself in terms of consumption, whether that's food or digital media, whatever it is. It's sort of eliminating that mindless scroll, the mindless snacking.
100%.
That makes a big difference, right? Um, yeah, that's great. And then any kind of specific changes with your meals, just kind of like focusing more on whole foods. Is that kind of what you're focusing on?
So, primarily, I guess more of a focus on getting more protein in.
Mm.
That's really what my meals have been about because I'm trying to increase my protein, the amount of protein that I was taking in, and to have a little bit of a calorie deficit because I am trying to lose a little bit more weight, gain a little bit more muscle. No, I don't want
Hmm.
to be like one of those bodybuilders, but I do feel a difference in my body when there is more muscle. So that's been more of my focus. Being a dad, it's just juggling it. It's like
Yeah,
you do the best that you can and just keep rolling with it. Got to have that goal of what you're aiming for. That's
just keep
really
showing
it.
up. Just keep
Exactly.
showing up, right? Yeah, that's another important one is the protein. Um, some of these habits, right? Like these are some of the no snacking, having more protein, right? These are kind of like those really big 80-20 habits that are going to really make big changes for you, right? Sometimes people get super focused on the minutia of stuff,
Hmm.
which is important, right? And there, once you get to that level, it's sort of like, okay, what's the next thing I need to conquer, right? And it is
Right.
part of the process. But people jump the gun, I think, a lot, with some of those first steps. Like it can be that simple. It's just
Right.
getting a little bit more protein, stop snacking, right? It doesn't have to be a super regimented, you know, um, crazy diet. And like people see, I have people in my family or whatever that see see the way I eat, and I eat very strictly. I'm a very disciplined person with my diet, but I didn't start off that way, right? I've been working on that since I was like 19 years old, slowly
Wow.
kind of like iterating, finding out what's best, what works best for me over time, right? And making
Right.
those kind of tweaks. But you can't just go from just being completely just eating whatever you see whenever you want, like having no structure, to being insanely structured. Like it just doesn't,
Right.
you're never going to stick to that, right?
100%.
I see a lot of people kind of like they want to focus on a very specific diet, whatever it is, whether it's keto or whatever, or even just like if they're focused on calories, doing like only really counting every single calorie and like scanning every single food item onto their app to see how many calories they're doing. And I'm like, it's not sustainable. It's like you can do
Right.
that for a while, but eventually life gets in the way. It's one thing if you're you're a 20-year-old person, you're living at home with your parents, like you have time for that. Like I used to do that.
Right.
I used to freaking weigh my chicken breasts, right?
Wow.
Now there's no way I'm going to do that. My kid is screaming, I'm behind on this, whatever. I'm not going to be like taking out the scale to weigh my chicken breast. I'm just going to eat the damn chicken breast and estimate how much protein that is, right?
Right.
Um, so if you're starting from the level of where you're already a busy parent, you're a working professional, it just doesn't make sense to go that hard that quickly, right? Go be that
Yep.
disciplined that quickly. The first step, the first rung on that ladder is some of those that low hanging fruit habits, like the more protein, like the snacking, making just intentional choices on focusing on more whole foods versus unprocessed foods. That's what's going to give you the best results, and that's what's actually going to be sustainable in the long run, right?
100%. Yeah, it's like you're saying, you gotta build it out where it's the big picture. This is what you are not just doing today, but it's what you plan on doing for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And not to say that things won't change and you won't change it, but when you have a long-term focus, you realize that it's like you're saying, you can't weigh the chicken breast every time. But does that really make that much of a difference? No, it really doesn't in the long term.
In the
It's
long
more
term, yeah.
important that you remain consistent and that you keep focusing on how you're eating than exactly to the T what you ate. And that's with all these things, with everything, with parenting and with life in general, with goals. If you don't retain a long term focus, then you sort of get caught up in the moment a little bit too much and it becomes overwhelming. And then you just drop it because we don't want to be inconvenienced. We don't want to have, like even like going back to the gym concept. Oh, now I got to go to the gym and I got to drive there and then it's an hour, this and that. You end up dropping it. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
focused more on the daily routine aspect and you want to keep up your health in the long term, that's going to be more of your motivation.
Yes, absolutely. Long term thinking. I think people just struggle with long term thinking in general. Just it's not having foresight is just not that common, unfortunately. It's something you have to work on, I think. And it's something that can be
100%.
developed for sure, but it's not something that everyone has intrinsically, right? And you see it across the board, whether it's with people with their finances, with their careers, right? Whatever it is, right? It goes back to the marshmallow study. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, the classic marshmallow study, right?
Yeah.
There's certain people that are just kind of geared towards thinking about, okay, what are the long-term gains if I make these short-term sacrifices, versus some people who are just like, I can't even think about the long-term gains. I just want what's right in front of me, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that can be developed, and I think it makes a huge difference in your life if that's something that you can focus on.
For sure.
Sustainability and long term over everything, unless there's always going to be specific examples of when it's a short term goal that you're working towards, but those are so uncommon, right? I think of it like as someone who's like if you're an athlete that's competing in a certain sport or something, you need to make weight. It's like, yeah, you should be counting every calorie, like every bite matters, like that's super specific. Or you have some health condition where your health is already failing, and you're working with a practitioner who's saying like, yeah, you need to get your insulin down like today, right? Like we need to make like a serious intervention here, right?
Right.
Then sometimes you need to take more drastic measures. But for the average person who's just looking to make improvements and keep those improvements, it has to be sustainable. It absolutely has to. There's no other way around it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I sort of blame it on technology in a way, that we get so caught up, and until there's a realization of what social media and technology is doing to our brains, it's very hard to have that mindset of the long term, because everything seems to be so instant. Whether you're watching somebody that made $1 million overnight, officially overnight, some maybe did, some maybe didn't, or you're just seeing like, I wouldn't, maybe like get rich quick schemes, or even just the fact that we're so programmed that if we don't like this, then you swipe to the next. If I need something from Amazon, I need anything, I can get it from Amazon. And depending on your city, you can get it in a few hours.
Yeah, I
So,
was just going to say that's a perfect example, the Amazon example, messing with your expectations.
yeah. So, like, if you can't get past that, or if that's like your daily focus, but you're not even thinking about it, how can you expect to have a long term focus? Everything is right here, right now. If you want to watch a movie, it's in your pocket. If you want to order something, it's in your pocket. It'll be by your door in a few hours. There's just there's so much that we have. There's so much that we can lose if we don't have the proper mindset and be able to control this thing so that it doesn't damage us further. And the same way that we have with food, where they have all these scientists working on making the food more enjoyable and eye pleasing and whatever else they're doing, it's the same thing with technology. The idea is, how can we pull more people in for longer? How can we keep them on our platform for longer? And that's what's happening. If you don't realize that that's what's happening, so that you can put up your guard and you can put precautions, you could, try to figure out a way that you're not going to get pulled in all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way you can have long-term vision.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, especially with the technology pulling you in. That's so true. I heard someone say the other day, it's like if it's free, that means you're the product or something along those lines,
Right.
right? Which is how it is with social media. People don't
100%.
realize that it's free. Yeah, it is free, but you're paying with your attention. You're paying with
Yes.
your focus, right? That's when you kind of, especially for me, because I work in social professionally, right? So I know that just that attention is everything. That's
Right.
that's the currency that we're working with here, right? So being able to keep your attention and not lose focus and all that, that's so important. Yeah, I think definitely these things in society, they're totally ruining our ability to see long term. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. It's so hard to focus on that kind of stuff and think like, okay, I'm going to make this change, but I might not see any results for like 6 months. Like that's hard. That's
Yeah.
hard, right? Because we are being trained like this. Like with Amazon, for example, it's you just get so used to that. Oh, I'm going to order this and I'm going to get it tomorrow, right? So now when you order something online, maybe from like a small business or something, and it's like it doesn't come for like 3-4 weeks, you're like, what's going on here? What is happening? Am I getting scammed? Like what's going on? Why don't I have this immediately? Right. And it's like
Right.
you have to think back, but like, oh, if you ordered something, 10 years ago, like that would be pretty normal. Like you would probably wait like,
Yeah.
2 to 4 weeks to get something, right? That was like a totally acceptable thing. That's why most people would go to brick and mortar, because if they wanted it now, but they would have to go out and leave their house and go and do the thing and talk to people and whatever, right? It wasn't as easy. So it's funny how that's sort of like distorting our perceptions of reality. And there's some things that are not going to change. Like you're going to have to put in the work until they can come out with a drug that mimics, exercise and whatnot. You're still going to have to put in the work, and there's just no way no way around it.
Yeah.
And I mean, they already kind of have started doing that, a little bit of that. Like, I don't know if you've done any reading or seen that, like the Ozempic drug and other kind of drugs like that. There's sort of
No.
these new weight loss drugs that are really popular or getting more popular and kind of being popularized by people in Hollywood. Have you seen that stuff?
Thankfully not.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, basically it's a drug that sort of helps with weight loss. But again, it comes with a price, right? Of course it
Everything.
does, right?
Yeah.
All the side effects and whatnot. Um, and one of the kind of the biggest problems with it is that it doesn't really discriminate between fat and muscle, right? So
Wow.
people are taking it, but they're actually just they're losing weight, yes, but they're just losing body mass, so they're losing muscle mass as well.
Wow.
Sometimes even more muscle than fat. So when they come off the drug, if they're talking about percentages, they've actually gotten fatter because they've
Wow.
lost lean mass, even though the scale says less, but they've actually become fatter as a percentage, right? So that's a big problem too, right? And there's ways around it, of course. You know, you can be lifting weights and eating more protein to kind of preserve some of that muscle, right? But people don't want to do that stuff. If they were eating more
Right.
protein and lifting weights, they wouldn't even need the drug in the first place, right? But everyone just wants that shortcut.
Quick
And
fix.
that's the quick fix, right? That's the main issue. I was going to ask about your training too. So how do you kind of balance that with, you know, um, with your fatherhood duties? How do you get those workouts in? What's your sort of like plan, or is it kind of just ad hoc whenever you can, or do you have some kind of a system where you can implement that stuff in your life?
So I've tried implementing it at certain times. Tried in the morning, tried at night, tried in the afternoon. I'll take a break because I work from home. And there's nothing specific that ends up working. Sometimes it's like 11 o'clock at night and I'm exhausted. I want to go into bed. But I'm like, I know that it's important to keep it up. Even if I don't get my full workout in, sometimes I'm just literally like, I'm totally done with. I could just fall asleep on the floor,
Yeah.
and I know that I have to take care of myself. I got to get sleep, but at the same time, it's important that I get the exercise in.
Keep the habit,
So
right?
yes, there's no specific time per se. It's something that I would like to develop, but I know that at this point in time, it's just if I do that, there's more of a chance that I'm going to hurt the time that I have with my family and taking care of other things. And I don't feel that it's worth it for me at this point to do that. But one thing I want to touch on, which ties into this and to the previous conversation, is what I find to be the most helpful for long term is making charts. And like I was saying, I have on the wall over there. That's what I have for a weekly chart for workout. But I've done monthly charts. I've done charts for a few months. And the reason that it changes a lot of things is because that in a way is like your dopamine hit. Because you see what's going on that, okay, I got to check for the past 4 days. I don't want to break that streak. Or I almost got the entire week. I don't want to break that streak. Or look back, I did a whole month. Or I did, whatever it is. So when you, instead of having to visualize it, it's in front of your face. And when you see that
Hmm.
all the time, it's like, cool. That's, there are there are weeks that I've missed that I haven't gotten to where I want to get to. There are weeks that I way surpassed what I wanted to do. And it's all part of the long term. That's really what it comes down to. But having that in front of your face really makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think I saw Jerry Seinfeld talk about that at one point, where he was kind of like trying to develop his habit of writing sort of every day, and he would just mark it on a calendar, just put X's on a calendar and have that visual sort of stimulation where it's like you don't want to break that streak of
Right.
X's. You just want to keep it going, sort of gamifying it, right?
Yeah,
And trying to almost like tricking your brain, right? Like these little hacks to kind of trick our brains into doing what we want them to do, right? That's
100%.
pretty powerful. I like that with the charts. It's a good idea. So do you have your kind of your plan on there as well? Sort of like what you want to do for the day, or like, are you tracking your numbers in certain lifts, how many reps you did, anything like that? Or is it more just like, just kind of in general, just keeping the habit?
So for the most part, it's been, for a while, it was progressing. And then I was trying to find the sweet spot of what I can maintain and then where I can push myself, obviously, depending on the week and how things have been going, how I'm feeling. Because I want to make sure that it's more important to sustain what I'm doing than to try to do something more than I did last week, but end up failing miserably and maybe not getting through even half the week. But
Mm.
yes, every day I have the amount of reps that I want to do for each one of those exercises. And then, so that's the top part of the chart, and the bottom is just like the check boxes, and I fill in how much I actually did. And then every once in a while, I'll flip back through the old papers and just like look and like, look how far I came. Like, initially maybe
Yep.
I was doing, let's say, I don't know, 5 push-ups. Now I'm doing 20, 30, which it happens to be I joined a group of guys doing push-ups. We're doing 100 push-ups a day. And I just recently hit my 100-day mark. And then starting last week, I haven't been feeling well. And I dropped out temporarily because I need to recover. I
Hmm.
lost my streak. But it's not as important to maintain that streak as it is to maintain my health, to be there for my family.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it was a huge accomplishment because I've been doing this since early March. And this was the first 100 days that I got consecutively. And now it's starting all over again. But it's just to prove to you that it is possible. I mean, I have a sign on my door over here. I set myself a goal, and it's a little bit over a year ago, that for 2 years I'm going to do 10 push ups a day. Just 10 push ups a day, just something small. And I remember when I first wrote that, I was a little bit nervous about that. I'm like, I'm going to do it every single day. But let's say I'm not feeling well. It's like, let's just do this. And at a point, I ended up joining in with these guys and doing 100 push-ups a day. There was a point I got up to 150, 160 push-ups a day. But in the long term, it's just building those small blocks and keeping that consistency. And you end up feeling the changes over time. It's not going to be 2 days, maybe 6 to 8 months, but you're going to get there.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one thing I've been a big proponent of too, especially in you know, early fatherhood, when I realized like there's a lot less time to devote specifically 100% to workouts, right? It used to be
Right.
where I would train 4 or 5 times a week. I'd go to the gym, I would take my sweet ass time with everything, no problem, right? Time is, you had all the time in the world. But now it's like, it's a lot harder to dedicate that time. And sometimes you're going to have to miss workouts when you don't want to miss a workout. It's just because fatherhood duties or work gets in the way, right? And you have to miss a workout. Um, but so one of the things that I've been implementing is I've heard some people call them micro workouts, right? That's kind of the term that I'm using. So
Yep.
it's not really a dedicated workout time where it's like, okay, I'm going to go work out for the next hour sort of thing. Here's my routine. It's just like, oh, I'm just around the house doing stuff. I'm just going to just drop and do, 40, 50 push-ups, right?
Right.
And then that only takes me 5 minutes, right? Just a few minutes of my time. But then if you're keeping track of those and you look at the end of the week, you're like, wow, I've done like 1,000 push-ups this week. And it's like, I didn't even realize that. Versus if you were like, okay, I'm going to do 1,000 push-ups on Friday, I'm going to dedicate this amount of time. Like, it's probably never going to happen, right? Because you get busy and things happen, right? But if you can get these little micro workouts in throughout the day, those things add up to the end of the week. And then if you
Yep.
stack that on top of a few, 2 or 3 actual dedicated training sessions, well, now you've got this like awesome fitness routine. And it's like you sort of replace that volume in your training of what you used to have when you had more time with just a different way. You're still getting that amount of time in, right? And that's why
100%.
also like being able to work out at home is so is so crucial, right? I can go into my garage and do a set of pull-ups and then just go right back to work or go right back to what I was doing. It's not, that was a big change for me in my life, is like realizing like fitness is not, it's not a place you go to do it, right? It's a part of your life. Like this, we're made to move, right? So it's like,
Exactly.
how can you implement these ideas of fitness into your everyday life? Because that's so important, right? It used to be where I had my dedicated training sessions, and then outside of that time, I was just like completely sedentary. And it was just like, this, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you miss one training session because you get busy, and now all of a sudden it's you're sort of below that threshold of where you're actually making progress, right? Yeah. So these micro workouts, that was super important to me, and something so simple like push-ups, right? People, they get this idea of fitness in their head is they have to go to the gym and they have to lift weights and whatever, but the push-up is just one of the most basic things that you can implement, everyone can implement in their life and get better at. And it's so simple and it's so accessible, and it's just such a powerful movement. So that's pretty awesome to hear that that's been a focus for you. Any other kind of like exercises that you found that you not only enjoy, but like that have made a big difference in your physique and your weight loss?
I'd say walking.
Yeah,
Walking,
walking is a
just
big one.
like, I don't know, there's just something about walking that it keeps you, you can go slower, you can go quicker, but there's just this movement. And especially when I go walking with my wife, our phones are not really out. Like, we have it on ring because the kids need a call for something or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Usually we're not on the phone. Sometimes obviously things come up. You know, we may have to speak to a teacher, or we may have to speak to, something may come up with a family member, whatever it may be, and they just need to talk at that point for whatever reason. So it does happen here or there, but for the most part, you're connecting, you're talking. So there's something about walking. I don't know what it is, but it's the movement aspect that I find it to be very complementary to everything else that you do. Like, even if you're doing your squats and your push-ups and your pull-ups, you still like, walking, I feel like, is like one of those baseline things that everybody should do.
yeah, for sure. And again, super easy to fit into your life, right? Whether it's dedicated walks, like you said, with your wife, or it's just, parking at the end of the parking lot and walking
Yes.
into the store versus parking
Yes.
right out front, right?
Yes.
It's easy to make those little changes, and then those changes accumulate, right? And
Yes.
it's also something that's easily trackable. You can track your steps, right? Most smartphones have the ability to track your steps, and you can see over time how many steps you're accumulating, right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Parking further away is a huge one. It bugs me so much. Like, once I realized what I was doing, like, always trying to find what's that closest spot. Like, I'll just pull into the parking lot, go straight to the back, and like walk. My kid's like, "Why are we walking from so far?" I was like, "Exercise." Like, "You're in a rush somewhere? We could walk." I was like,
Yeah.
"It's so far.
Yeah.
We're gonna walk around the whole store anyways. You're gonna walk up and down the aisles looking for whatever candy and stuff you want anyways. It's gonna be okay if we walk a little bit further. I promise you."
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. I have that battle with my wife sometimes too, actually, because for her it's more of like, she's an extremely competitive person.
Yeah.
So it's almost like she wants to get the best spot, like right out front. So she'll like circle and circle and like wait. I'm like, we could be in the store already if we
Right.
had just parked back there where there's open spots, right? But for her, it's just like a competitiveness thing. Like she just wants to get, the best spot, right?
Right.
Um, cool. So I also wanted to ask about sort of balancing your fatherhood duties with, being a creator, working full time. I mean, that's challenging, right? I mean, that's something that I definitely struggle with, is how do we balance all of these activities? And I think you're doing a fantastic job. You're putting out a lot of content. So I just wanted to get your kind of take on that and see if you have any productivity secrets, or maybe how that's kind of like, talk a little bit about how that's evolved over time, right? How you've sort of like made little changes and iterated to sort of be more productive over time. Any advice you have there?
So there are definitely times where First of all, I guess I want to take it a step back. There's something that is very spoken about called work-life balance. And I don't think there is such a thing. I don't think there ever is truly a balance. I think there's a focus on priorities. I believe there's a focus on priorities. And if you really ask yourself what you're doing at any given point in time, it's you've chosen something for whatever reason you feel this is the priority. So pair that with your long-term vision, and you sort of create a lifestyle for yourself. So you want to teach your kids, you want to spend time with your kids, you want to make a connection with your kids, the same with your wife, as well as building, being able to support them and maybe building something, or you have a hobby. It creates a big picture. And I find that most people harp too much on work-life balance and don't think enough about what's that big picture that they want to accomplish. So I don't really have an answer to that. My thought process is when I have the opportunity to spend time with my family, which is fairly limited at this point, I have to make that decision. Am I going to spend time with my family now, or am I going to step aside for now and go work on something else? Most of the time, I'm going to push my creator stuff to early morning and late nights. There was a time where I was going through a cohort for about a month, and my weekends were pretty much locked down to dealing with the cohort. I was spending a lot of time on it because it's an investment for the future for myself and for my family. And it was a discussion that my wife and I had prior to, before going into this, what the expectations were and what we were up against. So on the day-to-day, my focus is still primarily my family. That's the most important thing to me, because if today's my last day, what impression do I want to leave? What's that thing that I want to do? Do I want to spend the extra time working and not spending time with my wife and kids? That's a question that every person has to ask themselves. And when it comes to taking a walk with my wife, sometimes she'll say, "Aren't you busy? Don't you have stuff to take care of?" My answer is always the same. This is more important. I can be ridiculously busy, and I may end up being up till later than I wanted to be. But if there's two things that I have to take care of, that's a decision I have to make. Where am I going to sacrifice? And I don't think that any person can lean on anyone else for that answer. They have to look at themselves and say, this is my situation. These are my needs. And sometimes I may have to skip out on creating stuff. But that's where technology does come into play. So I will use technology as much as I can in any which way, shape, or form, always looking for new tips, tricks, and hacks of how to streamline things. So for content creation, there may be days, where everything just comes to me and I can schedule out a whole bunch of content. And then I'll try to sneak in some time here and there throughout the day to interact with people. As far as my job, I've gotten a lot more rigid with sticking to hours and working less outside of those hours unless there's an urgency. And I've made that very clear to my superiors, and they're very okay with that. So it's really just figuring out what are your priorities, how do you want to handle it, and focusing on that. And I'm not saying that everybody can just go to their superior and say, "Oh, I'm just going to stick to those hours," and they're going to be okay with it. Some people may be in a position where they don't have that ability, but that's a decision you have to make. Do you have to go look for another job? Do you have to find another way to get by for now? But be open with yourself. Don't fool yourself, because you can't really fool yourself. It's just, that's how it is. And make use of technology for the good. There are so many tools out there. Whether you have to set reminders, or you have to send somebody an email to take care of something later, send somebody a message, have somebody remind you, whatever it may be. But use technology to your benefit. There are so many things you can do out there, especially if anyone's a content creator. Use a tool. It may cost, yes, it costs $30 a month. For some people, that may be breaking the bank. For other people, you have to make a decision. Is $30 worth it for a month that you can spend more time with your family? So it's really just perspective, and keep in mind what your priorities are. Make use of technology, and that's how I do it.
That's great. Yeah. And I think maybe even to sort of going back to what we talked about earlier is just being whatever that thing that you're deciding to prioritize at that time, be focused on that and
Right.
be present with that. Right.
Yes.
There's this sort of thing that, you can get caught in these sort of like multitasking things where you're trying to work on something creative. You're trying to finish a work project. And then you're also trying to like keep an eye on your kid. And it's like, if you're trying to juggle all those things at the same time, they all suffer and
Yes.
they're all shit, right? Versus actually time blocking sort of those things and what, like, okay, I'm going to prioritize on this for the next hour, and then it's done and I'm moving on to the next thing, right? I
100%.
think that's something that I have to get better at too. And just being able to be 100% focused and present on whatever I've decided is the priority in the moment. I think that's huge.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy thing. It's
Yeah, for sure.
especially with technology, like the more devices we get, and I don't know if you have a smartwatch or like all these things, like technology is literally everywhere and it's more and more prevalent. So there's always something new that you have to try to figure out how to make it work with your life and not against your life.
I swear, I'm like a few notifications away from switching to a flip phone. Don't tempt me. I've been considering that as like a social experiment kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's at some points it gets to the point where like you just want to take your phone and just throw it out the window. Like that's it.
Yep.
Leave me alone.
Yep. Exactly. That's great. So, is there anything specifically in your evolution um, of fatherhood that you're most focused on right now, that you're kind of prioritizing as like, this is the one thing that I need to work on right now for yourself?
So I'm becoming a lot more focused and working more on building a stronger connection with my older two kids because they're just about going into their teen years. And I'm trying to make that extra effort. Also, learn more about what the teen years are about and try to set myself and my wife up to be able to understand what's going to be going on and how to best work with our kids through those years. And another thing is, I'm becoming more and more aware of my actions and reactions. So when I'm responding to one of my kids, when I'm responding to my wife, how am I reacting to a situation? And one of the things that I harp on a lot is change your actions to change your reactions. Because if you change who you are, you're going to react differently. So let's say one of my kids makes a mess all over the floor. Why did I yell? Like, I was upset with the situation. So why am I yelling at the kid? They made a mistake. So, like a situation like that, which thankfully I've been more cognizant of over the years, and for the most part, I've changed my reaction, but I still have plenty to work on. So just to be more focused on who am I and how am I reacting to these situations so that I can change my behaviors and change my thought process so that I can react differently.
That's great. That's some serious self-awareness work right there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to finish off, Jonathan. I appreciate all of your insights here. Why don't you tell people where they can find you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
So I'm primarily on X, Twitter, whatever people know it as, at the Evolved Dad. I have a newsletter. So you can go over to theevolveddad.com, and my landing page is, I have theevolveddad.com/it's me. I'm on Spotify. I have a short cast, which is I keep it to about 10 minutes of talking, just little concepts and ideas. And anyone ever wants to reach out for any questions, chat, some advice, can always hit me up on Twitter. That's the best place to find me. And I think I'm on Discord and Telegram as well. But with all the spam going on, Twitter's probably gonna be the best bet.
That's awesome. One channel to focus on is important. Going back to priorities and focus, right?
100%.
That's great. That was a great conversation, Jonathan. Appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
Yes, thank you so much.